Leading Education Towards Successful Teaching and Lasting Knowledge, or Let's Talk, is a podcast that discusses relevant topics and issues in education management and governance. Hosted by Dr. Evelie Serrano, Dr. Monica Walet, and Dr. Emely Dicolen, Let's Talk is an extension initiative of the Institute for Governance and Rural Development, College of Public Affairs and Development, University of the Philippines, Los Baños. Dr. Evelie is an associate professor and the director of IGRD CPAf. An education enthusiast and lifelong learner, she is passionate about improving the quality of teaching and learning through teacher training and education. An assistant professor at IGRD CPAf, Dr. Monica has occupied academic and leadership positions in higher education institutions in the Philippines and Singapore. A registered psychologist, she is a well-known mental health advocate and speaker who designs and facilitates training programs aimed at promoting mental health and well-being. Dr. Emely is an associate professor and currently the college secretary of UP Manila's National Teacher Training Center for the Health Professions. A dynamic administrator and education manager, she has introduced innovative programs and projects in various institutions of higher learning. Let's Talk, every Wednesday on the UPLB College of Public Affairs and Development Facebook page as we lead education toward successful teaching and lasting knowledge.
Hi, this is Dr. Monica and together with me, Dr. Evelie and Dr. Emely for our bombastic episode 05. Uy, kumusta na kayo? 2 weeks tayong nagkaroon ng break. The reading break sa universities natin and the Holy Week break.
Okay naman, kahit pa paano nakapag-recharge, no? Kahit konti, no? Konti lang naman, no? Pero syempre, masaya kasi family bonding, alam mo na yon. Pero yung mga trabaho, na mga naiwan, syempre, binalikan pa rin. Kaya nga eto, back to DWP pa din ang beauty ko.
Ay, walang pahinga.
Oo, DWP. Certified.
Certified na talaga yan.
Oo.
Ayun na talaga ang corona, Dr. Emely. Same here. Nakapag-recharge naman for a few days ng Holy Week break. Pero ayun, back to work agad, Easter Sunday pa lang. I had to travel to Bicol to administer the written comprehensive exam of our PhD in Development Studies students. But we're back, and we're now on our 5th episode.
Wow.
Hey.
Galing, ano? Kasi in our previous sessions, we initially talked about the readiness for blended learning by educators and learning. Then, we discussed the perceived impact of remote learning by students and remote teaching by teachers. So in the process, we recognized the learning gap brought about by the emergency remote teaching on the students and how educators are mitigating the perceived impact to the students and teachers. Today, together with Dr. Evelie and Dr. Emely, we will share with you some relevant studies and findings from local and international think tanks on these issues, particularly the challenges in teaching and learning and the interventions to address these issues. So, Dr. Evelie and Dr. Emely, can you share the significant findings and recommendations from studies you have encountered on the readiness of students and teachers on blended learning?
Yes, Dr. Monica. Recently, I read an article which reported that institutional support is critical in the successful implementation of blended learning. Citing different authors, Sabuwala and Mishra in 2021 noted that the success and the positive attitude of teachers toward the blended learning mode of teaching learning has been most successful where institutional support at design, planning, and implementation is given. So the amount of hands-on experience an institution has provided to their teachers is equally important. Hence, I am grateful that the University of the Philippines has been very supportive of its faculty members as we transition to blended learning and hybrid learning. Kasi kahit gaano pa ka-resourceful at creative ang teachers, it's still much better if they have the support that they need from their schools, may it be in the form of training, gadgets, and adjustments in tasking. Teachers, in my opinion, will be more motivated to try new teaching approaches if they feel that they are being supported and valued. Ang sarap naman talaga sa pakiramdam when you know that you are not alone in this fight for quality education amidst the challenges of the pandemic. Kaya our schools, with the help of our government, should find ways to support our teachers. And one way is to invest on information communication technologies or ICTs, as these are a necessary ingredient in blended learning. But more than that, teachers should be given enough training on the use of ICTs.
Tama, no? I agree with you, Dr. Evelie. In the literature I've read, emphasis is given on the importance of ICT, and that includes connectivity and gadgets. This is considered as a significant factor both by teachers and students in the use of blended learning. To cite one, a survey conducted by UNESCO on the situation analysis on the effects of and responses to COVID-19 on the education sector in Asia shows that pre-pandemic, 71% of South Korean teachers felt that they could support student online learning. They were confident. However, in the survey conducted during the pandemic, around 20% expressed that they still need professional development in ICT skills for teaching and learning. Pero syempre naman, South Korea yan, 20%, no? Considering na, di ba, isa na sila sa mga may high-speed internet connectivity. E paano pa kaya yung tayo sa bansa natin? At saka yung ibang mga bansa na wala silang ganong resources, di ba? Nakakaawa, nakakalungkot. I'm sure mas malala ang epekto sa kanila. And at saka ha, by the way, no, another article I read, no, by Bune and Slavin, they mentioned that there is a small percentage of students in South Korea who are not yet fully adept, no, in the use of technology in teaching and learning. Siguro share ko lang sa inyo, no, a bit of context kung gusto niyo ng kwentong K-drama. Alam nyo, ang mga South Korean parents, lahat sila, halos lahat, majority, are quite busy working, and most of them move to the cities, those who live in the countryside. So usually, iniiwan nila yung kanilang mga anak sa mga grandparents nila. So sila na yung nagpapalaki sa mga apo nila. So siguro yung mga nakikinig sa atin ngayon na mahilig sa K-drama, medyo nakaka-relate kayo, no, sa kwento ko. So in that survey by Bune and Slavin, ang sabi, these children daw who are not yet very familiar with technology are those that are taken care of by their grandparents who live in the countryside. So ito yung mga batang, yun nga, pinalaki ng kanilang mga lolo at lola na hindi naman computer literate. So, although may gadgets sila or computers kasi provided ng government, hindi rin naman nila alam kung paano gamitin. At syempre, lalong hindi nila alam kung paano ituro sa mga bata yung paggamit nito. So, parang nag-cause din siya ng inequality or gap na in terms of access to education among Korean children. So, yun ang sitwasyon doon.
Nako, no, wag na tayong lumayo. Here in the Philippines, natatandaan niyo ba yung naging meme ng maglola? Na yung lola na bumili ng smartphone para sa apo niya for online learning. Aba, sabay sila nag-aaral. Yung lola, pinag-aaralan niya paano gamitin yung cellphone. Yung apo naman niya, nagtatry naman maintindihan ano yung lesson sa school. So, tingnan natin yung sitwasyon, no? Isang digital native at saka isang digital immigrant na pareho o sabay. Talagang pilit nila talagang inaaral itong mga bagay-bagay na to sabay. So it's really difficult, no?
Yes, that is true. For us to fully utilize, the power of technology, kailangan alam natin paano gamitin. So, yun nga, ang laking tulong talaga kasi ang ICT skills for teaching and learning, especially now that we are exploring blended learning. Kaya, those involved in the learning process, students, teachers, parents, and the guardians, including the lolos and the lolas, diba? Somehow should know how to use properly, these ICTs so as to maximize their benefits. And schools must keep that in mind also, when planning school interventions. Meanwhile, Sabuala and Mishra noted that the implementation of the blended learning approach post-pandemic will surely help in improving the learning delivery environment for lecturers and teachers who will be considered as learners while attending various training programs. So, yung mga teachers naman kasi, no, hindi rin sila limited to teaching lang. So, learning, as we know, is a continuous process. And so, yung mga teachers natin, di ba, estudyante rin sila, di ba, as they try to learn more about the different ways by which we can facilitate effectively teaching and learning. So, nagiging estudyante rin sila. At of course, itong knowledge nila on the use of ICTs would be very much helpful. And so, it would really be helpful if yung mga teachers natin, no, are knowledgeable of information communication technologies. So, not only will their knowledge of ICTs help them, okay, in the classroom as they facilitate lessons, they can also use ICTs to learn more.
Yeah, I agree. Tama kayo dyan. Kasi according to the Department of Education, recognize talaga itong blended learning as a good and valid way to deliver education as the agency looks into its implementation even after COVID. So currently, some 27 million students in the country are under the distance learning system, where the medium of instruction is through modules and online. So as face-to-face classes were suspended to stem the spread of COVID-19. Kaya nga, marami talaga mga ganap, no? Pero tingnan naman natin, what about studies on the impact of emergency remote teaching or remote learning to learners and remote teaching to educators, and also in education management?
Well, alam mo, Doc Monique, obviously, isa sa mga epekto ng remote learning to learners and teachers as well ay yung impact nito sa kanilang mental health. This was due to the disruption to daily routines, and learning, as well as additional fear and anxiety due to, let's say, family loss of income or unemployment, as well as online threats. In the same document I cited earlier, by UNESCO, it says that suicide among young women was up an alarming 17.9% in April, that month when the pandemic was raging through South Korean society. At syempre, we have to remember na hindi lang naman mga guro at estudyante ang apektado dito sa remote learning na ito. Kahit nga mga parents ay apektado kasi most of the parents are on work from home arrangement. Hindi rin naman nila mabigyan ng tamang oras, or sapat na panahon ang pag-guide sa kanilang mga anak. And worse is, hindi rin nila alam kung ano yung mga pinag-aaralan ng kanilang mga anak. Kasi sobrang advanced na.
Yes, talagang challenge, another challenge for them. Okay, so in the context naman of education or classroom management, remote learning has really changed the teaching and learning environment. Sharing again the findings of Sabuala and Mishra, advances in information technology such as development of web applications, mobile devices, and telecommunications have inevitably changed the design and delivery of the educational curriculum. And as a teacher, kailangan mo sumabay. Otherwise, your classes may not be as effective, interactive, or enjoyable. So this remote learning setup has really challenged us to be more flexible and adaptive. And this, of course, can add to our anxiety. I can just imagine those who are not as technologically savvy. All these are really stressful sa kanila. Kaya tama si Dr. Emely. Apektado talaga ang mental health, hindi lang ng mga estudyante. Even our teachers' mental health is very much affected. And this would probably explain why marami ring hindi masaya sa online learning.
Ay nako, so interesting talaga mga studies that you have shared. I think the data also is aligned with a study by Dulig na nabasa ko recently. They use qualitative exploratory research, and the researchers were able to document the experiences of undergraduate and graduate students. Ang lokal ng research na to ay sa Amerika. And surprisingly, ang kanilang pananaw dito is that they were really unsatisfied with the unexpected disruption to online education. However, they had to adjust to digital learning and stated that they would rather have subpar. Ibig sabihin, kahit okay na lang education, than put themselves and others in danger due to the COVID-19. Kaya nga lang, the major challenges that the students encountered are, struggles with online education, difficulty connecting with instructors, lack of motivation, losses, difficulty assessing other learning resources, and unsafe and inaccessible home environment. Alam nyo, ang recommendation talaga nila boils down to one thing: provide more resources for instructors and administrators to support students in their challenging times. Kaya yung huli nating episode, ang ganda na naging talakayan natin about learning gaps and learning loss or unfinished learning. Kasi base sa ating mga experiences, diba? Na-observe natin at saka napuna natin ang sinasabing learning losses or unfinished learning sa ating mga estudyante, sa ating mga classrooms, virtual classroom. At sa inyong pananaliksik, I believe meron pa tayong mga nalikom na iba, diba? O pandagdag. Ano ba ito mga ka-Let's Talkers?
Yes, here's something that I have learned from a recently published UNICEF article. Now, according to this UNICEF article, estimates suggest that without urgent action, a grade 3 child who has lost 1 year of schooling during the pandemic could lose up to 3 years worth of learning in the long run. So, grabe ganun kalaki pala yung pwedeng nawala. So, accordingly, learning losses due to school closures are one of the biggest global threats to medium and long-term recovery from COVID-19. Therefore, this issue of learning loss is not to be taken lightly.
Oo, totoo yan, Doc Evelie. Seryoso talagang usapin ito, no? And in addition to what you mentioned, an article also that I've read by Dorn et al. On COVID-19 and education, the lingering effects of unfinished learning, no? It said that the impact of the pandemic on K-12 student learning was significant, leaving students on average 5 months behind in mathematics, no? And 4 months behind in reading by the end of the school year. The pandemic widened pre-existing opportunity and achievement gaps, hitting historically disadvantaged students hardest. So tulad nung na-mention ko, if you remember in our previous episode, kung dati may learning loss na, lalo pang lumaki, no, with this COVID-19. Kaya ang unfinished learning, sabi nga nila, is it's really real and inequitable.
Wow, naku. Alam niyo, consistent din yan naman sa study dito sa Canada by Whitley. Pero ang kanilang focus dito were children who are considered to be vulnerable due to educational, environmental, and social factors. Pwedeng they could be considered separated from their parents, no? Or they are living in extreme poverty, Poverty Canada, chronic illness of self or parents, lack of social support, or even education, that makes them vulnerable to abuse, neglect, deprivation, and violence. At sa kanilang research, they found out that they are negatively affected by the events that cause significant upheaval in their lives. Imagine the changes that were imposed by COVID-19. Una dito, syempre, yung social or physical distancing, closure sa eskwela, reduction in the community-based services, have weakened the system of support necessary for these children to learn and develop. Kaya maraming bata, maraming kabataan ngayon nakaka-experience ng disengagement, chronic attendance problem, declines in academic achievement, increase in credit attainment during the time of the pandemic. Ang dami pa talaga dapat pag-aralan. So these vulnerable children, youth, and their families require access to reliable, high-speed internet, effective and inclusive learning spaces, and a range of coordinated social services. And again, isa lang ang tema dito, stakeholders need to develop and fund initiatives that address these critical areas to ensure that educational opportunities for all children and youth can be realized.
So yes, there really is a need to develop and fund initiatives to address this issue of learning loss. The UNICEF reported that the economic cost of lost learning from the crisis will be severe, So a recent estimation, according to UNICEF, predicts a $17 trillion loss in lifetime earnings among today's generation of school children if corrective action is not urgently taken. So imagine that nga, no?
Oh.
$17 trillion. Wow. So this demands our urgent action. If we don't do something about it, what will happen to our future generation? If schools and education ministries abroad have already recognized the challenges and implications of learning loss and are struggling despite the fact that they have more resources compared to us, paano na lang tayo dito sa Pilipinas? So even before the pandemic, the Philippine education sector, as we know, diba, has already been plagued by problems. We have to act now.
Yes, ang galing. Iboto natin si Doc Evelie sa Education Party List.
Nako, hindi dapat let's talk party list.
Yes.
Why not? Representing educators na walang pahinga. Pero,
Ay, nako, kayo talaga, no? Napaka-pilyan nyo. Anyway, so this is another engaging talk with Dr. Evelie and Dr. Emely. Alam nyo, every episode, ang dami kong natututunan na bago. What we have discussed today made me realize that despite all the things that the pandemic has put on Philippine education to our students and to us teachers, laban pa din.
Laban.
But we cannot discount the recommendations given in the various studies we featured today. Madami tayong dapat gawin within the institution and to the whole system of education. We need open-mindedness to accommodate innovations and a good amount of will to make these changes happen. And according to Dr. Evelie, we have to act now.
Oh, na.
So mga Let's Talkers, until our next episode,
Let's talk!